one of the other things I want you to touch on, because you have a strong raw background, and I see this all the freaking time, and how I know the answer. I just want you to explain it in a way that I haven't explained it before.
Okay.
How important is the walkout on the squat for the, from first set all the way through competing? Because look at how people walk out the bar 135, and then they're fucking up the walkout at a meet.
I will say, well, let's start it by this way. I see people messing up the walkout in a couple of different ways. One, they're not staying tight. So now they're wasting tons of energy in those small muscle groups. They end up being the major factor. Two, why do you need to walk out more than a foot? I see people step out 60 inches, like 10 feet away from the rack. And I'm like, guys, like, you're only going to fuck up this much. And if you fuck up more than that, you're probably going to hit the floor. So you just need to do a baby step. So I heavily calculated when I was in USAPL, I watched Eddie Cohen probably squat on video at least 1,000 times to watch how he would set his feet and watch how far he'd come out of the rack, because I knew he was doing everything as efficient as possible. The problem is with every lift, how you start is going to be the biggest inclination whether you make it or miss it. Because if you start with something crooked, especially when those weights get heavy, I'll give you an example. I watched Maddox just miss that 804 bench. I knew he was going to miss it right at the top. Because if you watch that handout, you guys go and watch it, you watch the handout, he hiccups. As soon as he hiccups, all of those stabilizer muscles are trashed with 804.
I saw the same thing.
And I don't know if you guys know this, because I've had 844 in my hands with a shirt. A millimeter of screw up with those kind of weights, especially in the bench press, is failure. And for him to even look pretty good going down and get that close to coming up is impressive as hell. But I knew immediately at that point he was going to fail. My point is that it failed right out of the rack. And the same thing happens with the squats. Most of the time, you can tell by how somebody walks something out if they're going to make it or miss it, just based on how they step and how they brace.
And what I try to harp on that is, for most lifters, they don't put any thought into it. They don't think the lift starts until the judge says, and it's like, no, it has to be set. The steps need to be small. I mean, when I started competing, there were no monolifts.
Right.
So
and I didn't have monolifts in the USAPL. So I squatted 826 at the USAPL Men's Nationals as a junior, which was crazy. But my technical walkout was so perfect. And when you get up to 800 plus pounds on walkouts, you know real fast how important those walkouts are. So I only think you're having that conversation with guys squatting 300, 400, 500.
Oh yeah. Or it's a little bit heavier, but I remember when, because there was no internet at the time, and the gym I was training at, a guy named Jack Buchanan trained there. He played football at Findlay College at the time. And he had a 900-pound squat, and he was kind of part of the crew we were training with, not really, but he watched me and he's like, we spent, oh my God, I bet 2.5 hours. Just, nope, put it back. Nope, put it back. Nope, put it back. Nope, put it back. I'm like, what the? And I didn't, after that day, I realized this is important.
Well, and I'm glad that you reposted the Learn to Squat video we did 12 years ago, because how long did I spend on him teaching how to set up on the bar?
Exactly.
What, a half an hour? I mean, that whole video reel didn't show it, but I literally taught him from A to Z on squats, and up to R was before he picked up the bar.
Yes.
The SWD, all the rest of the alphabets. That's after you walk it out.
Yes.
Because you would be so surprised at how people set up a little crooked. They don't have their hands right. They don't have their sternum up high. They don't have their back arched.
They haven't figured out when to breathe.
They don't know when to breathe.
You can't.
And that's an art with walking out, because you can't hold your breath the entire time. You have to pick up, walk out, get your feet right, and then reset your air for the squat command. I mean, I couldn't hold my air that long, not with 800 pounds.
What do you want to risk it? Because what if the judge takes extra time?
Because they will.
To give you the command. You know what I'm saying? So you got to figure it out.
Yeah, you judge 200 squats. After a while, you're going to make some, like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I see it all the time.
This is a question that gets thrown out. Where do you see the future of powerlifting going? I know it's a tough one to answer.
Well, I think with not more advancements in pharmaceuticals, I think we're getting close to the human limit of potential. You look at guys like Ray Williams and Vlad. I don't foresee anybody beating their squats anytime soon. The deadlift is one of those other lifts. I think it's going up, but the reason is because powerlifting is becoming popular and it's picking more people out of the woodwork that are properly built to pull.
Well, there was a bar change too.
Yeah, so and that makes a big difference too. And what you start to see is you're starting to see in powerlifting, at least in my perception, because I don't watch it as much anymore. You start to see these specialists. They're really good at one lift, but they're not. But the total guys aren't really doing that much better, in my opinion. You don't see the totals rising. And to me, I was a powerlifter. I'm a total guy. Yeah, I have world records in the squat, but it was always to hit the total because, in my opinion, when your focus is the total, your focus is everything, including your weaknesses. When you're, say you could deadlift 950, but your bench is 365, I don't give a fuck what you're doing. It doesn't matter to me because you're focusing on what you're good at. I like to see people focus on what they need to work on.
Yeah.
That's just been our mentality on how to train.
Well, it's always, I mean, I came in the sport as a power, the total's always been the thing.
Yeah. You can have the
always.
baddest squat in the world, but if your total's jack shit, I mean,
exactly.
You're a great squatter. Cool.
Yeah, that's why I always wanted to know how to deadlift sumo and conventional. I wanted to be able to know how to bench tucked and feed out because you don't know what's going to happen, or you have to pivot.
Or look how many times the IPF changed the rules in the last 20 years.
Yeah,
that's insane. I remember we used to be able to bench on our toes, and we had to go back to our feet. Adaptability is key, but that's the thing with training and competing and all that stuff is being able to adapt. And that's the thing is like when you do stuff smart, your chances of adapting to what you're doing is much higher. And that's what we're here to do. You're here to adapt to your training and get better. If you're just here to work out hard, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
You need to be having an ability to get better. And that becomes what I feel is what's missing now in powerlifting is we look towards these genetic freaks that could pretty much train any way they want. And they're going to get a little bit better or better than most people. But I want to see when you stick and you have maxed out your knowledge and your genetic potential, where do you go now? Because I've hit that 6 or 7 times. I've hit a point when I first squatted my first 1,100 pounds, I was like, I don't have any left. A year and a half later, I squat 1,200 pounds because I had to train less.
Yeah, yeah.
This is what's fucked up is like people like, oh, I wonder how much harder you had to train to get that 100. I had to train 20% less because I was beat up. So what I found out is I was overtraining to squat 1,100 and I was optimally training to squat 1,200, but the system looked the same.
I think you said a key thing for a lot of lifters that they may not understand is I've had multiple times like that as well. You hit that number, you're like, well, fuck, but my point is, you had that thought, I had that thought, a lot of other people have that thought. Yep. We all have that thought. It's what you do with it afterwards. So maybe a few days you're like, man, I don't know. My technique was good. Nothing broke down.
It was a fucking
and it
grinder.
took everything to get it up. I got to now physically get stronger, and that's the only card I have. But then a few days later, you start really thinking, like, what have I not done? So it's not, I want lifters to understand we all think that, but then we all go back to the drawing board and we have to look at things that we thought we knew for sure.
Yep.
And question everything.
Your circle, your education, and your experience is going to dictate whether you make the right turn or the wrong turn after that point.
And your self-talk. I mean, you're allowed to think that way for a while, but then that narrative has to be, I'm figuring this out.
I mean, and that was the same thing I figured out with the winning warm-ups is I had to swallow the pill and say I didn't need to get stronger, I need to get fitter.
Yes.
I needed to figure out a way to be fitter. The strength was already there. And I think that's the biggest problem that people run into is they're so closed-minded because they don't have that broad education to start going, maybe there's another piece over here. The key is you want to try to find the pieces to get better that don't cost more energy. Because eventually you only have so much.